Hello, my name is Charles Chapman, and welcome to Authors in Focus. We have two guests today, Wisdom Sakura and author Michael McGrew. Wisdom Sakura is a spoken word artist. There we go. She is a self-professed showman. Wisdom delivers a poem like a diva delivers a song. We're going to find more about her and her new book, Wisdom, an anthology of collected writings. Michael McGrew is from South Los Angeles. He is the author of My Kind of Girl and his new book, Taking Losses. And we're also going to find out about what he likes to do in his spare time, also starting a movement for authors all over. So we'd like to welcome both of you to Authors in Focus. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So let's start with you, Wisdom. How long have you been a spoken word artist?
I've been a professional spoken word artist for about 9 years. I would say that. It's when I started doing shows in my home city, Anchorage, Alaska, in 2002. Did my very first show. My stage is called Speakeasy. And from that point, I started bringing artists in and basically starting a movement in my city with spoken word, just to tag on to what's going on nationally with spoken word.
Okay, Michael, what is your story?
Well, professionally, I've been writing for 2 years now. I released My Kind of Girl 2008. Between 2008 and mid-2009, I sold over 5,000 copies. Made a tremendous amount of money my first year, but also made a tremendous amount of mistakes as well. Since then, I've started my own company, Legacy Publishing Group, and actually signing my first 2 authors this month. And we're definitely, promoting adult literacy and women's empowerment. And since I've discovered my niche and my market, and I've discovered my profession, it's definitely, doors are opening. And I'm glad to be here in Los Angeles promoting adult literacy because, of course, we all know that literacy and reading builds better communications. And that's
Now, you grew up in the south side of Los Angeles. Can you tell us a little bit about your experiences growing up here and how it's shaped you as an author?
I've being a child of public schooling, I really took advantage of that. Well, I didn't take advantage of the education process. I was a mischievous child, to be, at a youth. Yeah. Don't let the smile fool you, But, one thing I do say is I've never missed a day's lesson in life. And I've learned a lot, from my community. And most importantly, I wake up with the intent to give every day. So I wouldn't necessarily focus on the negative that I've, experienced, but I've also experienced a lot of positive things too. So that's one thing that I choose to promote, and that's positive, energy.
Absolutely. And Wisdom, what were your experiences growing up?
Well, actually, I'm from South Central LA, and I now reside in South Central Alaska, so I see it's full circle.
You love South Central.
South Central is South Central. But my experiences were, I had good experiences. The classroom started at home. My mom was my first English teacher, so language was always utmost, priority for me. But I do definitely remember a difference in the two areas, going from California to Alaska, and having the experience of being feeling important, and not having had that experience before I left California, but then getting into a broader scope of living, pretty much, and then still having my connection with cousins and stuff back home, and coming back in summers, realizing that in one place I'm allowed to do everything, and another place there are limits, right? So I realized that that's the place. It's not the people, So that's the experience that I remember.
Did you experience culture shock when you first moved to Alaska?
Yes and no. Culture shock is the fact that I didn't recognize anybody, my family, pretty much, but. Culture shock, like most people think, no, because there is a huge population of blacks in Alaska. And so, people are people wherever you go. So it was culture shock, and just being that, there was no family there. But, my aunt was my girlfriend's aunt, was the same attitudes, and a crazy uncle, and then, crazy cousins, and it's just outlandish mothers all over the place. So it was the same kind of family. It was just being without my family. That was the biggest thing for me.
Okay, Mike, your experience with BET, it led you to writing scripts.
Yeah.
And so what else did you do for the network?
Well, I was a lighting technician. I've worked on numerous shows such as LA Live, Live from LA, the year '99, Sprite Night, couple comic views, teen summits, and in that environment, it gave me the opportunity to see how hard work pays. You know, coming from, you know, my community, you know, we had outside influences such as, you know, drug dealers and you know, pimps and, you know, just the typical urban tale. But that opportunity, his name is Frank James, I still thank him to this day, and he gave me the opportunity to see the other side of entertainment and other outside sources in the industry. So that 2 years working in BET actually shaped my perception of success and diligence and hard work. You know, I took up a hobby of script writing, but as far as, I've always been a good storyteller, you know, but as far as taking it, you know, professionally and putting it down on paper, you know, it's been about 2 years, but I really accredit that particular time in my life, you know, as far as there is something better in life outside of just, you know, urban trade, pretty much.
So true.
You know, I love stories about moving from one side of the country to the other or to a totally different area. I moved from California to Atlanta, lived there for 6 years, had culture shock. What prompted you to move to Alaska?
Actually, my mother moved us after the passing of my father. So it was her desire to raise her children in a different way. You know, the things that were relevant then are relevant now, and it's really, you know, it's the onus is on the person to get over those things. And so she took it upon herself to, you know, look for that road and to give it to us. So that's pretty much how it came about. I didn't do it because I don't know if I would have thought of Alaska myself.
Okay, so you moved when you were very young.
Very
This wasn't
young,
a
yeah.
self-motivated
But then by the
move.
same token, it's really the only place I really feel at home when I get
That's
there.
great.
There's,
That's awesome.
there's a
is.
definite peace in Alaska, you know.
Have
so
to come see.
we don't have anything
Exactly.
else, but
And I mean, she's also inspired me. Like I
Yes.
had no interest in even, you know, moving or even visiting Alaska until I met, you know, till I met Wisdom.
Yes.
well, part of what I do in what I do at home with my shows and stuff is I bring poets in, and just to have the experience with people who are coming from, you know, Los Angeles or Bmore or, you know, DC or New York, and to see them seeing a new environment and
yes.
being like, you know, wow, this is just like, I mean, the air is fresh,
Yeah.
the sky is big. I had an artist, 13 of Nazareth from Virginia, come up, and he was like, the sky is just big. I'm like, what do you mean the sky is big? Because I used to understand the sky is big. So to have bring people out of South Central and bring them to Alaska, where the mountain, it looks like you can touch the mountain. It's an awesome thing, and
Yes.
it does a real beautiful thing to
It's
the
therapeutic
creativity.
for the
Yes.
spirit.
Yeah,
Yes.
I've had
Yes.
a poet, Complex, out of Baltimore. He wrote a beautiful poem while he was in the hotel room about his experience with his father and wanting to play football when he was younger. And when he shared that on stage, I about passed out, you know, just to be a part of that process, to give a creative mind a landscape to create that kind of beauty. It's just, it was more than worth the trip.
Great. We'll be
Yeah.
booking our flights.
Yes, we will. Yes, we will. Yes, we will. Your first book, Wisdom, an anthology of collected writings, was just published. What can you tell us about your book?
It's pretty much true to the live performance. It's a collection of what I think are my strongest pieces. I write what I say is life poetry. I write my experience as a woman, as a black woman, as a human being. So it's I write the human condition. It's probably more of a story than it is your standard poem. A poem for me might be 3-4 pages long. I call them epics. So yeah,
Okay.
and a good poem for me has a definite beginning, middle, and end. So you have the start of the story, the climax of it, and then its ending.
Great.
Well, even though we introduced My Kind of Girl, and you can talk about that in the minutes we have left, Taking Losses is coming out.
Oh yeah.
So let's talk about that.
Well, Taking Losses is, first of all, I begin my stories, or I start to develop my stories in my mind, and I usually let them sit and marinate for about 2 to 3 months in its entirety before I begin to write. And I started with the title. Taking Losses is the title. Actually, I had this title before I thought of My Kind of Girl, which is my debut novel, but the name, I started with the name Nikki Green. And from there, you know, I wanted to attack a lot of issues that goes on in our communities. So pretty much, Nikki Green, he lives a lifestyle that he doesn't particularly care for, but he actually aspired to be who he began when he was when he was a teenager. But once he got involved in his lifestyle, he found that it took away from what was most important to him, and that's his family. a lot of time on the road, and he couldn't really spend too much time with his family. So over a course of years, he decided to separate himself completely from that lifestyle, but it took a lot of time to tie up loose ends. And when he finally got the chance to separate himself completely after being saved and finding, the Lord Savior Jesus Christ, he ultimately became a victim of his previous lifestyle. It's a story that takes place in Chicago, but it moves to New York. And I also include his family. I write chapters from his wife's perspective and his 12-year-old daughter's perspective. So while he's in, he actually winds up going to prison for 10 years, and that gave me an opportunity to elaborate and discuss, single-parent households and the separation between the father and the mother and how it affects, a teenage daughter. So at the time when she really needed him, he wasn't there, to provide for her, even give her the voice of a father. So she fell victim to a lot of situations, such as dealing with boys, and the mother was forced to work a second job and so forth. But not only do I discuss, from the daughter's perspective, but the wife's perspective, and dealing with, the father her husband being in prison, and also being enticed by outside influences with men, having affairs and so forth. But overall, the story comes together in its entirety. I'm actually very proud of this novel, and I can't wait for my readers to grab this novel. It's available nationwide, Amazon, everywhere. Ebooks available. I'm also selling books.
I love the color. I love the cover. How did you decide on using your?
Well, I'm all about marketing and branding.
That'll do it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what better opportunity to become your own model?
Yes.
So I mean, I just like to just express artistic abilities, and it's also cost effective too.
Exactly.
Where
can we find your book?
You can find my book on my website, mynameiswisdom.com, and the links are there for it, right through via PayPal. Yeah.
Okay. And Mike, you have a website?
Yeah, actually, legacypublishing.com. Also, www.bookbizcoach.com, where I offer tips and industry secrets to self-published authors looking for, extra some assistance, because I made a lot of mistakes. And in my past, I didn't really get too much assistance from my fellow authors or people I looked up to. So now that I've obtained the knowledge that I seek before, now I offer it for free.
Well, we want to thank you both for being on our show, Wisdom and Michael
Yes, thank you
McGrew.
so much.
Thank you
Appreciate
both
it.
so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Wisdom Sakura, an anthology of collected writings, and Michael McGrew, Taking Losses, which will be out by the time this airs. Also, you can check out My Kind of Girl. Definitely. Product placement, there you go. My name is Charles Chapman, along with Chandra Adams. You can visit us at authorsinfocus.com, and we thank you, and always keep your dreams in focus. Take care.